Getting started here. Oh, let's get started here. Just go ahead and share the stream. I'm sending notifications and I'm turning everything on. And of course, the final copy will be sent out later and I'll have it clipped. So there won't be any dead air. Let us begin. It is April the 11th, 2023. I have a quote here from Ray Kurzweil, 2012. And this came out in psychologytoday.com. Conspiracy theorists, otherwise known as people capable of pattern recognition, is what it's referencing here, I think, indirectly or inadvertently, calling it out like it is. Because a conspiracy theorist is the heretic of the day. They are blasphemers and spreaders of toxic and malinformation, which literally kills people. But here's the quote. Pattern recognition, according to IQ test designers, is a key determinant of a person's potential to think logically, verbally, numerically, and spatially. Compared to all mental abilities, pattern recognition is said to have the highest correlation with the intelligence factor. And you'll note that people are trained to laugh, mock, and deride pattern recognizers. You notice something, you call it out, and they operate as T cells in the immediate matrix, filling in the holes, filling in the gaps, and attempting to stamp out any kind of doubt. Doubt's illegal. I mean, once they make it 100% illegal, you want to. There I have blue helmet, NWO, UN troops kick down your doors, rip the question marks, or they're just going to stop making them. We have a lot of topics today. DALAI Biden. I mentioned it the other day, and I believe I coined DALAI Biden just to explain what it was. I didn't really want to talk about it very much, and it's a good example of whether you'll be able to tell whether people are able to objectively call evil out, or if people are going to go with the consensus that says, no, this is fine, everything's fine, this is normal. Although I don't think it's normal in any world for anybody, Dalai Lama, the Pope, or any of these robed individuals to assault a child like that, which is what I would call it. The kid didn't ask to be kissed. Very, very bizarre. And I don't think they can just explain this away. Again, if you're in the chat, join here by Watchdog X322, Salty Siren JT, Salty Siren with a vomit emoji. Yes, exactly. You're looking at the Dalai Lama's tongue, and he's like telling the kid. I mean, it's just horrible. And I don't even like spreading the story because the kid's a victim. It's a crime scene. To be honest, it's a crime scene. And what they ought to do is they ought to arrest the Dalai Lama. What's the difference between the orange robes he's wearing and an orange jumpsuit in a cell or a monastery? Same thing. But, to keep them away from the kids. Okay, handing out wrenches in chat again. It's a new channel. Your mama says so grody over there from D Live. Right. Well, here's the thing, too. He's getting older. And I think it's the same this is why I call him DALAI Biden. People would say, why is Biden, sniffing the kids? And of course, the Democrats don't see it because their eyes are wide shut. And they want you to have your eyes wide shut, to not see what they don't want you to see, even if it's right in front of you. And with the Biden thing, they kind of minimized it for the longest time. And I'm seeing this is kind of similar. And I'm thinking maybe we're just looking at individuals who are losing their impulse control with age, and that this is pretty much behind the scenes what they are. It's like a never-ending Pizzagate party behind the scenes. And look, pattern recognition is really, again, it's something that has a very high correlation with general intelligence. You're recognizing a pattern. And yet, when you recognize patterns, what do? They call you crazy. Here's an article from Crikey.com. Dalai Lama's, quote, suck my tongue controversy has conspiracy theorists excited. Like, yet you're a conspiracy theorist if you see something wrong with that. Conspiracy theorists claim the viral video of Dalai Lama kissing a young boy proves their belief of a pedo elite class, a core QAnon tenant. Look, QAnon or not, I don't believe in JFK or any of this Santa Claus uh, fairy tale about some savior coming to fix everything and give everybody money. I'm not a QAnoner, but that this idea that just because you agree with one of their tenets, you're one of them. This is guilt by association, and I think it's definitely trying to get you to not call out what is pretty obvious, because this is proof. This is proof of a pedo elite class, if you ask me. Look at all his friends. Look at all the people who've done selfies with him. He's connected with that Nexium sex cult. You can see him at the Wailing Wall. All these religious leaders, I think, are very questionable, for one. But two, here we have evidence, and now we're being mocked. I'm sorry, but what kind of person would minimize this? Again, this is a crime scene. Going through some comments. Your mama says, my pattern recognition was off the charts when I had my IQ test as a child. Right, you've probably been flagged. They probably flagged you. And right, and even up to today, like, oh, this one's going to notice. We got to keep an eye. Because the cult of the all-seeing eye has to know who knows. And they have to maintain a watch on everybody who knows to recruit them or in some way invalidate them. And I think that we are this think tank, the IPS think tank is a group of pattern recognizers. And one of the patterns I picked up on recently, and I recently just added this to the IPS lexicon in the Discord server, truther bait. You got to watch out for truther bait. And there's two reasons why I find this interesting and notable. One, the fact that they put out false leads to trick people noticing patterns guarantees we're looking at hoaxes. Our basic analysis is vindicated, verified every time they throw out false leads. They're gaming us. But it's one of these things where we have to be aware that they know that we know, and they're responding accordingly. And this truther bait concept is like when they put out videos where it looks like a body in a body bag is moving. So the media is staging all the bodies, but it's just a clip from a music video. Like, they leak stuff out there on purpose, and they let the truthers run wild with it. They did this after the shooting in Tennessee, where the shooter's shoes changed, or did they? Well, they didn't, but it's kind of ambiguous. But everybody focused on that. Oh, therefore it's fake. Therefore it's a drill. And then the media debunks it, and they say, oh, look, you guys ran with the bad lead. You should just wait for the masters. Let the experts handle it. Let the pros do the media, and you just watch. That's the message here. Again, that shooting in Tennessee, this is a right-wing Sandy Hook. It's turning the right against not the bowl cut shooter with the MAGA hat and AR-15, because those guys are on their side, but it's turning them against the trans-radicalized leftist shooters. And it's like the epitome of everything the fringe represents is embodied in their shooter. And for years, well, 2 decades, we've had this endless succession of these shooting events where the bad guy is always typecast as a right-winger. And the right wing doesn't give a damn about gun control. Well, here we are looking at the last 7 or 8 mass shootings have all been non-binary. And now all of a sudden, guess who cares? All of a sudden, all the right-wing pundits care about mass shootings. They didn't care before. That's how this PSYOP entertainment complex works. They managed to get everybody involved in the big script. And they're trying to get rid of those of us who see through it. So they put out bait to trick us, to mislead us, and to get noobs to have their first attempt at cracking a story torn down. It's all intentional. Okay, let me read one of these. This is a comment from the Dalai Lama's Twitter account. A recent video has been circulating where a young boy asks His Holiness if he could give him a hug. This is holiness, huh? Like, to be honest, what's worse? What would be worse? Sam Smith performing unholy on TV, prime time, or the Dalai Lama, His Holiness, kissing some boy against his will? Like, which one's unholier? Like, I think Sam Smith's looking pretty good right now compared to this. But anyway, the tweet says, His Holiness often teases people he meets in an innocent and playful way, even in public and before cameras. He regrets the incident. Now, according to this, and I think this is damage control, and Salty Siren says we're in hell. Yeah, I think so. Because listen to this damage control. This is from crikey.com, and it's calling out pattern recognizers who see this as evidence of wrongdoing. Again, this is a crime scene. It's a crime scene. Can anybody refute that? But it says here, quote, sticking out your tongue is a traditional greeting in Tibet, and archival photos suggest the Dalai Lama has a history of greeting with a kiss. But for fringe groups, the video is evidence of their conspiracy that the elite are the leaders, they're all pedos. This belief is a core part of the QAnon conspiracy, which believes that Donald Trump will defeat this cabal of satanic cannibals. Again, this has nothing to do with Q. Cubstar says, would he regret this incident if it was innocent? Exactly. Why did he even reveal that he was regretting it? He should have said, oh, you guys just don't have any culture. This is how we say hi in other countries. Like, no, that's not a good enough excuse. But crikey.com is like, oh, you're bad. You're one of the QAnoners. And again, I'm thinking this is Dolly Biden. He's just kind of getting up there in age. And I believe they already found a new Dalai Lama, reincarnated. I believe he's 8 years old. Nothing weird about that. Nothing weird about a group that venerates a child and claims they're a divine incarnation. Look, the guy's celibate. I did some research on it. He's celibate, if you want to believe it. Very, very questionable organization. And again, very sick. Okay, next topic. Stormy Daniels summons demons and does some tarot card readings and cries, and the reporter cries. A journalist, and this is from foxnews.com, a journalist had an emotional interview with Stormy Daniels. And again, she's the center figure in this arraignment of Donald Trump. The storm is coming. It's very much, this is hitting all the right buttons to aggravate the QAnoners. Like they're like seeing something in this, and Trump's going to be pulled in again on Thursday. But Daniels is at the center of this. And I think she happens to be a player in this script. I don't think this is valid or real, but then I come across this. It says, and this is from an article where this reporter is interviewing Daniels, and she brings out some cards. It says, quote, she shuffled the deck, and between her palms, a force field of energy swelled. She dealt the cards. The room shifted. My ears began to ring. Tension spread across my forehead, and my eyes filled with tears. I looked across the table. Stormy was crying too. I was bewildered by the wave of emotion that crashed over both of us. And I asked her, why did we cry? And she said, because it's real. It's chaos, death, and destruction. Now, what does this mean? Stormy Daniels, adult film star, brings out some oracle cards, kind of tarot cards, during an interview and talks about death, chaos, and destruction. Well, think about this. This entire story with the storm is coming, Stormy Daniels, it all ties into this apocalypse narrative. Waco, American apocalypse. Donald Trump saying 2024 is the final battle, Armageddon reference. This Palestine and Ohio thing. All this stuff is connecting to this building biblical narrative. Well, Revelation, you have the vision of Daniel. And Stormy Daniels is having this vision of chaos, death, and destruction. And there's a lot of, again, apocalyptic significance to this stuff. And it's not a coincidence that we just had this Easter Sunday and the Christification of Trump continues. And it's actually getting more blatant. I mean, SNL made a big joke about it, but they put all the symbolism there. It was a very blasphemous opening for SNL where this Trump character steps in front of the Last Supper, compares himself to Christ, etc. But they've been building this, as we've been talking about for a couple of weeks. And his arraignment was curiously tied and connected symbolically to the MLK, Martin Luther King Jr. assassination date. But now here's an article from rollingstone.com. Get ready for a Trump resurrection. Get ready for a Trump resurrection run in 2024 before the curtain is officially dropped on the awful original appears. A sequel's in the works. Again, we're talking about this theme of Trump and death and resurrection, the Christification, his association with Waco. He kicks off his 2024 presidential campaign in Waco. Waco, you had Dave Koresh, who thought he was Jesus, died at 33, died a martyr's death. And Waco is a huge part of the story because Waco is where Alex Jones got his start. All of this is very connected. Another article from commentary.org, The Trump Resurrection by Abe Greenwald. Well, they did it. Donald Trump's enemies went and brought him back to life. And this article is about how, quote, when Trump nearly stumbled into irrelevance, but then this brought him back. I mean, it's just, yeah, he stumbled into near irrelevance. But again, overnight, he seems to have been resurrected. And it's their word, resurrection. And using this word during Easter, like this is metascript. This is what I mean when I say there's an echo chamber effect that they create by having the same messaging promulgated on every conceivable platform at the same time. It's always concurrent. If you want to know what's going on the news, you can watch Netflix. It's really it's paired up. Concurrent programming, like predictive programming, is just an indicator of how controlled our reality is. And it shows you there's no coincidences. Look, 3/22 was the date that Waco American Apocalypse came out. 2 days later, Trump does his rally in Waco. Do you think that movie was just coincidentally timed to coincide? And then there's a couple of books that just came out. One of them is called Fever in the Heartland, comparing Trump to this old grand dragon, D.C. Stevenson. And then another book on Waco. Well, you got these books coming out, all perfectly timed for this emergence of Trump, and it's building their narratives. Salty says they're pulling something now. Don's doing his job well of keeping both sets of eyes on him. Oh, yeah. It's like the spotlight, or rather the laser pointer that Big Brother holds, and the public's like a cat. And they point it at topic, current thing to current thing, and people just chase it. And right now, people are, I think Thursday, they're going to be guided to look at New York again, which is the 13th. And if we look into symbolism, 13 is majorly connected with the Phoenix death resurrection. Joined by Pippi Langstrup, here is your wrench. Cupstar says northeast, west, south news. It's how you read the sky. North, east, west, south. Their news story mimics the old story in the sky. Yeah, look, this metascript concept that there's this overarching story that allows the elite to bend our news, to write the history, and to write it decades in advance. It's not far-fetched. How many generations have been through predictive programming for an alien invasion? Ever since War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells. This is a story. History is something they write in advance. It's not that they simply edit the news. No, they're actually writing it in advance, and they steer everything along a predetermined course. And what's more, and this is where all the symbolism gets into it, is we're finding that these stories in the news often are iterations, or they reflect older stories, as in stories that come from the astrotheological cults, Mystery Babylon. Just the fact that the Great Reset was perfectly timed with the great conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter on 12/21/2020, when the Great Reset was a conspiracy theory until that moment, when we had an alignment on a winter solstice that we haven't had since Jesus was born. Jesus was born 2,000 years ago, year zero, Great Reset, starting over. That's when I realized, okay, their big story is connected with the astrological story as we transition into the new age, the new house, and the old house has to burn. But you have the broad strokes, big story, and then you have smaller stories beneath it. But again, iterations of older stories, like global warming is quite literally Noah's flood myth. And if you didn't know, you have the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration called NOAA. They've appropriated the biblical symbolism of the dove, of the ark, of the angel that warns them, only the angel is a satellite. And they've repackaged this old myth about how the God will punish the wicked if they don't change their ways. Only now it's the globe, which is the God construct, will punish the wicked. Or rather, the carbon super spreaders. Commenter said Orthodox Easter is next Saturday, the 15th. It's the Notre Dame burning and Titanic anniversary. Now, the Titanic is hugely significant right now. A number of our researchers in the Discord server have noted the use of the Titanic. Like we were talking about, everything was a train wreck a little while ago. Well, now everything's sinking like the Titanic. And the Titanic is a metaphor for the ship of state. It represents the West. The recent movie Don't Look Up, Titanic, being steered by capitalism, heading towards a comet, which is the iceberg. That's why they had Leonardo DiCaprio as the face of it, because he's the face of the Titanic. But you can't separate the Titanic, the movie, from James Cameron, who happened to be at the site of the wreckage of the actual Titanic on 9/11/2001, while the towers were falling. He was in the Deep Sea Challenger inspecting the wreckage from the Titanic, filming a documentary called Ghosts of the Abyss. Now, the significance to that is that the sinking of the Titanic, the falling of the Twin Towers, it's the same story. The Titanic, too big to fail, the West, capitalism, man's hubris, the Tower of Babel, all these things have been correlated. Tower of Babel, the Titanic, the myth of the whole thing falling down is being repackaged for us now. And then what's more, James Cameron is very significant at this time because he is the director of the new Avatar film, which is preparing people for a global consciousness, like the Earth becoming sentient, Gaia, just like Pandora. Not a coincidence that he's connected to Terminator 2. I mean, he directed that, and Terminator 2's got the Skynet, which is what? Just like Pandora, just like this world mind, Skynet. And what's more, Skynet or Gaia, it doesn't like man destroying the environment. Like man's the enemy to Gaia. That's one of the reoccurring themes in all of these recent movies and films. And then one more thing. The Avatar movie comes out, and my contention is that the Avatar movie, 50 years after Blue Marble, is meant to recreate the Blue Marble experience of bonding with Gaia. I actually think that he works with NASA, and he has. But I think that James Cameron and NASA that this Avatar movie represents a PSYOP. It's part of bonding people to the Earth. And interestingly, right after, again, it's called Avatar: The Way of Water, and it's about these Atlantean-like beings. Well, in the city of Atlanta, you have these environmentalists trying to protect a forest that's going to be leveled to make way for a police training camp. Now, that forest is being protected by citizens of the forest, like these defenders of Gaia. And they get into it with the police, and one of them dies. And then they join BLM. And what they've done is they put the raised BLM fist in front of a tree, which is the world tree, which is from the Pandora movie, the Avatar movie. What they did, though, is they recreated this basic storyline of Avatar 2 in Atlanta with the police fighting the citizen defenders, which is the basic story of Avatar, where the West has already used up Gaia and it needs a new planet to parasite off of. So it goes to Pandora, which is sentient, and it goes over there with all of its police force. Now, what's interesting, too, is this event that happened in Atlanta recently. You know, you have the central character, the environmentalist who was shot by the police, and they made a martyr out of him, saying this is the first time an eco-activist was shot by a cop. Well, the autopsy report, according to CNN, had it that he was shot through the palms of his hands while he was meditating, cross-legged. Like, how silly is that? You think cops would shoot somebody meditating? More or less, and moreover, through the hands? So they Christified him. And I'm just bringing this up because he sacrificed himself to save Gaia. This is a technique they use. It's a literary technique they use in the news. This is why we see Trump being turned into a martyr. It's all part of this storytelling, and they tell it from every single platform. That's why I'm saying it doesn't matter if you're watching the news or just Netflix. You're getting the zeitgeist. You're getting the big program regardless. Okay, continuing. Commenter says, year zeros are not new. Pol Pot in Cambodia had one. Well, the reset idea is central to how the elite rule this place, if you ask me, because the symbol, what does the reset actually represent? The word itself, if you ask me, and it all ties in, we could tie it into Terminator 2. Terminator 2's basic storyline, because it's about the world ending and it's the robots taking over, etc. But the movie is about the savior, John Connor, an obvious JC, Jesus Christ representative. And then from the future, the Terminator comes to stop him. And the interplay between the Terminator and the savior is like one of these reoccurring themes that we see in a lot of these movies. This reset, though, ties into this because in the basic astrotheological myth, when they personify the sun is conquering the darkness. It's lighting the day, but it's actually fighting off the darkness. But at sunset, what happens? The sun dies. And the sun dies every single day. It sets. Well, the Prince of Darkness is Set, like the Terminator would represent Set. And the sun at the end of the day is being dismembered. It's a bloody death. And then during the night, the goddess of the night sky puts him back together and resurrects him. And he's born again, the rising sun of the next day. This is a reoccurring story, but reset. Or Ra is the sun. Set is the darkness. Now, the Great Reset isn't just the setting on a single day. It's the setting on an age. The sun setting on the west. It's a bigger reset. The Great Reset. And I would also contend that the Great Reset is the Greta Reset. Actress, we all know this. She's a little movie starlet, not a real environmentalist. She's got a huge carbon footprint she'll never make up for. But the Greta Reset is what it's about. It's the youth. It's about leaving behind all of the traditions from the past that damaged Gaia, are damaging to Gaia. All the things that are holding us back collectively, including the gender binary. This is all part of the Great Awakening, I guess you call it the Great Work. In the Thelemic cult, they call it the Great Work. In the mainstream, they call it the Great Reset. But ultimately, it's synonymous with this green agenda, which is another way of just saying anti-capitalist. I mean, wasn't it just yesterday, there was talk, I believe it was JP Morgan, let me see if I can find out who it was. His CEO had suggested that governments and corporations start seizing private property to save Gaia. Yeah, JP Morgan CEO, this is the guy, Jamie Dimon, floated the idea that the US government and corporations could seize private property to expedite achieving their climate change remediation goals. It's communism, always has been. And the Greta Reset is a communist revolution. And when we say communist, what do we really mean? We could just say collectivist, because it's not really pure communism. It's not the Marxist paradise. That's all a fraud. But it's about this new ideal where it's not about property rights. It's about collectivism. Individualism has to be banned. I mean, that's why the mask really was put out there. Individual thoughts should be suppressed. Your face makes you unique. Gotta efface yourself. You have to be selfless to protect the hive. But yeah, here's an article from foxnews.com. JP Morgan CEO suggests governments should seize private property to quicken climate initiatives. Fascinating. Letter to shareholders, he wrote, quote, permitting reforms are desperately needed to allow investment to be done in any kind of timely way. We may even need to evoke eminent domain, which is when the government or the state seizes property for the good of the collective. Now, this is a letter to their shareholders where he suggested that we got to seize citizens' private property. On Tuesday, he said, quote, government, businesses, non-governmental organizations may need to invoke eminent domain to get adequate investments fast enough for solar, wind, and pipeline initiatives. Again, eminent domain is the legal term for the government to expropriate property for the collective. And of course, it would pay you. But look, they're gonna buy you off so you can go live in your domed, enclosed city with all your 10 times boosted friends. Because that's really what they're leading us to. We're going into Demolition Man. Joined by Stranger Days, says New Worldism. Well, New Worldism is Old Worldism, but it's dressed up like science, and it's going to be far more difficult to resist. They have the intellectual and moral high ground because they're saving the planet. And then you, being a questioner, you spread information that actually causes climate change. They actually do blame me for this stuff. I watch CNN all the time. I'm monitoring, and there'll be tornadoes taking out a small town, and they'll say, I hope it's not too soon to say that this is climate change. In other words, the Republicans did it. All right, continuing. We opened up talking about pattern recognition and anybody noting that the Dalai Lama kind of confirmed our worst fears about the elite in religion and other places. Yeah, that makes you a conspiracy theorist. It's like, well, I would take a conspiracy theorist with a functional intuition than a gullible dupe who endangers children, which is what we're seeing. You know who was really outraged about the Dolly Biden? Cardi B. Cardi B made a point about it. She seemed really mad, and she just stated very bluntly that there are predators everywhere. And that's not a conspiracy theory. I mean, how dare they minimize it? Although the QAnoners are wrong 100%, it's not just an elite thing, it's a humanity thing. Go to your local jail and tell me how many elite you find in those units. Okay, this is from, this is on Thursday. Look, this is going to be fun. Daily Mail. Is the Trump circus coming back to the Big Apple? Former president could return to New York this week to be grilled over his business practices. And this has to do with a $250 million civil suit against his business. And I believe that they're going to drag him in there again on Thursday. We'll keep an eye on that. The last one was a major nothing burger, but I mean, what do you really expect? They don't want you to have meat anymore. They want everything to be no more substance. They're not even giving us decent PSYOPs anymore. It's like everything is just so bland. Okay, listen to this. And this is good news, I guess. As of yesterday, it's official. White House immediate release, April 10th, 2023. On Monday, April 10th, 2023, the president signed into law HJ Res 7, which terminates the national emergency related to the COVID pandemic. So it's over. It's totally over, officially. They put it on a piece of paper. Which means what? Aliens? What comes next? Okay, Louisville shooter. I've been following this story, and a little while ago, they released the body cams from the cops, and it's very reminiscent of what we saw in Nashville, making cops into heroes again. And this is interesting because you'll note how the right wing doesn't care about shooters because usually the shooters are right wing, but now they do because the shooters are on the left. But what's also interesting is that in most of these shootings where it's a right winger, the police are terrible. How often do you remember the police being chastised for not taking action fast enough, for being cowards? You had Parkland, you had Uvalde. Well, those were right-wing shooters. Now with these liberal trans gun person shooters, the cops are super professional and they go in, they take them out and they get praised. Interesting dynamic. And it's to sell the story because the left is afraid of bowl cut shooter racists. The right is afraid of the fringe left shooters all of a sudden. But what's more, the story is more interesting to the right because they love the cops and they love to be able to, praise the cops. Oh, look, it does take a good guy with a gun to stop a bad guy with a gun. It proves one of their major tenets. Okay, let's see here. River Stick says, don't worry, Shill Gates is planning the next pandemic. Yeah, that's probably true, but I don't know if they can resell it. I mean, they repackage everything. Everything's a contagion now. Mass shootings are contagious. In fact, there was another shooter that was stopped, a potential shooter. This is like Minority Report, pre-crime. They stopped one, and they didn't say it, but I looked at the pictures, and I guarantee it's going to be another one of these. Look, I first started really paying attention to the news when I noticed that the shooters all fit a certain template. That's when I really started to pay attention. I'm like, okay, something else is going on here. There's no way that they can all meet the same exact type unless it's just propaganda. And this is really what kind of woke me up, you could say. And I called Jim Fetzer. We actually had a live stream, and I talked about the haircuts in particular, but I was talking about their facial expressions and their eyes and how every artifact, everything is connected to building this narrative. Like Dylan Roof wearing a Gold's Gym shirt. Well, the guy obviously never went to a gym in his life, if you saw the picture, but that was to associate shooters with toxic masculinity. Like, very interesting how they create these composites. But right now, what I'm seeing is they've created a new bad guy, a new enemy that's believable to the right. Very fascinating development. This Louisville shooter is also a leftist. Again, left-wing shooters never happened before. Oswaldo says what they really want is a derpdemic. They got it. They really did. You know, one by one, we got to watch all of our friends, neighbors, and family members jump the shark. You know, they all put it out. They all got into the costume. And they got into the act. I never got into the act. You know, I'm an undercover reporter in a sense. You have to blend in. But, you know, when they said stay home, don't leave your house, the first thing I did is I drove out to Roswell, to Corona Field, where the first UFO crash was reported in 1947, because I was realizing there are many symbolic connections between alien invasion and the pandemic that have been put forth in the movies and the media. They've made these connections for a long time. Even Men in Black, about aliens that invade internally, has this Corona Park scene. Then you have this reoccurring theme of, and this was in 2020, of like this injected alien parasite, like that movie called Sputnik. Yeah, remember in 2020, August 2020, Putin releases Sputnik 5, a vax. And on the day he releases that vaccine, a movie comes out of Russia, hits here, it's called Sputnik. And it's about aliens that infect the cosmonauts and they bring them back down to Earth. And now they're in a symbiotic relationship. They're infected by the alien. It's an internal invasion. And then it has more tie-ins to 2020 and the whole adrenochrome narrative, as these aliens would frighten their victims in order to feed off their stress hormones. That's the whole plot of the movie Sputnik, about these aliens that feed off of our fear. And of course, the human governments made a deal with the aliens in exchange for technology. Like, if you like your iPhones, somebody paid for that because it's alien tech, most likely. And it was obtained through some kind of an arrangement for, you know, basically human sacrifices to these basically gods. But the movie is pretty disturbing, pretty much a horror film. But I thought fascinating how it's timed. I mean, the timing of these movies now, I understand it now. It's concurrent programming. Like, did you see that one, Daybreakers? And these movies are so encoded. You could spend hours on each one. But Daybreakers is huge. And it was about a 2019 global pandemic started by vampire bats. Sound familiar? Bats, global infection. And that movie was replete with references to this adrenochrome thing, where the vampires that ruled the place, they didn't really like the synthetic blood that everybody else drank. No, they got the real stuff from humans that were terrified because they said, it just doesn't taste as good if it doesn't have fear in it. Like, there are a lot of reasons why people like, well, QAnoners believe what they believe. There are many reasons why. It's just the predictive programming, the stuff in the movies. It's just saturated with the stuff. It's like, how can you not think there's something there? Linda Curtis has been listening while playing in the garden. Done now. Thank you for joining. Okay, let's continue. We're going through the Discord server. Yeah, Joe Biden was asked if he was going to run or not. His answer, I don't know. Well, either this is Joe Biden. Well, I'll either be rolling eggs or, you know, being the guy who's pushing them out. Bidenism. Still, I like gaffy Biden much more than sniffy Biden. Gaffy Biden is preferable to sniffy. At least he's actually funny. The DALAI Biden needs to go to jail. All right, 737, here is your wrench. Thank you for joining. If you're in the chat, just say something. I'll hand it out. continuing, I'm seeing a lot more about, I wanted to talk more about this Trump Christification stuff, and it's pretty extreme in some of the rhetoric. And I'll be pulling some of this up. And I actually have a clip here that I found it. I've been following the QAnoners for some time. And like I've been saying, they worship the Kennedys, who they believe to be the blood of Christ. The media misses this. The mass media focuses on the very surface detail. But what I have here, I'm just going to read a small part of it. It's a prayer from Leslie Dwyer, who spent $50 on raffle tickets for a White House key from George News. Now, George News works with Trump, has a key to the White House, and he's selling it, or rather raffling it, to anybody who gives donations to one of his pages. And the people are under the impression that George News is JFK Jr. and JFK. They believe this. Here's an example from Leslie Dwyer. My mother in Chicago and I prove that there are America First Christian patriots in the blue cities of Austin, Texas, and Chicago. We read the Bible and pray together daily. Among our requests, I pray, our dear Lord continue to lead, guard, govern, guide, and protect our rightful president, Donald J. Trump and John Kennedy, for your families and teams and the good members of the military and the patriots worldwide, especially President Trump and John Kennedy. Keep them safe and rid our government, military, churches, and schools of evil corporations and organizations and the elite. That's kind of typical. They're throwing all kinds of money at this guy because they want a White House key, and they literally believe he's John F. Kennedy, who would be like 110 or something. My theory on this JFK worship is that they're symbolically connecting with Trump so they can JFK him, which would make sense if you look at all this martyr stuff, all the martyrdom symbolism. And look, this is a key point here. The assassination of JFK really is a staple in conspiracy lore, but most people got it wrong, or they're stuck with the whodunit. But the real story with the JFK assassination was revealed by James Shelby Downard, who found that this assassination contained all the props, all the components of a ritualistic killing of the king. This is some kind of a ceremony which has a basis in the I guess you would say in the pagan traditions, but essentially it was a Masonically encoded ritualistic killing of a king, the king of Camelot. All kinds of stories are connected with the JFK thing, but the story is the key point here. And I think what they've done is they've reintroduced the mythology, and they brought it back around Trump. I don't think that JFK is coming back super old, no matter how much they want it to happen. And here's another conundrum. Let's say it's true, and JFK was the second coming, and JFK Jr. is the third coming. What about RFK Jr.? Because RFK Jr. is running for president as a Democrat against Trump. How does that make sense? And RFK Jr., by the way, is not only pro-vax, but he's an environmentalist. He's full-blown Greta. That's how he really is. He's way into that radical environmentalism. My point is, doesn't he have the same Christ blood that the other Kennedys do? And what's even more problematic about him is the noners were asking, is JFK Jr. still alive? Scratch your nose if he is, while he's on a live stream. Because these truthers are so truthful, they can't just say the truth. So he scratches his nose, leading all these people on to think that JFK Jr. is coming back to save them. Now, was he even a Republican? I don't think so. Okay, let's continue. Hillman Avenger says, if we're all born equal, who has authorized the authorities? Right, they arrogate the power onto themselves, and they expect you to just grovel. They use the media as a narcissistic construct to turn you into a codependent believer and follower and subject. But that's optional. You don't have, you're not under an obligation to be a part of the world church. And once you understand that MSM is the de facto world state church, you can leave it. But they don't want you to leave it. They want you on the world stage, totally engaged, totally believing. All of the right wingers, and I follow all the big podcasts, Jack Posobiec, I follow Steve Bannon and a few others, and they're all terrified of left-wing radicals with guns. Again, they weren't scared of right-wingers with guns. They didn't care about school shootings, but now they do. And it's now, look, this is, again, target marketing at its finest. They do target market these PSYOPs, and they have for some time. And that was the story behind Vegas and Thousand Oaks. It's like, let's get these country music fans to go to a concert and get victimized by their own values. Now, as commenter says, fake authority. Let's take the word authority for a moment, or author, and God. God, darkness, chaos, let there be light. He speaks words and authors reality, creates it. And there's a connection between the authorship and the authority that's worth noting here, because the world state church has the all-seeing eye, the cult of the all-seeing eye, the monolithic control grid. And at the top, they're knowers. At the bottom, they are believers. But what I see is their objective is to be the sole authors, to monopolize the script. They have monopolized the big story, the news media that gets cut into stone, carved into stone, and turned into history. Because look, we see through fake news all the time, but guess what? It's all going to be in the textbooks. Like what we're watching is we are watching the creation of a fictional universe imposed over the real one to be accepted as real in the future. We're the only ones disputing it. Most of the people who consider themselves, quote, truthers are actually controlled opposition to the liars. See, truthers and liars, you think, okay, the liars are bad, the truthers are good. No, it's not that simple, because they're both on the world stage and they're both choosing from a limited selection of options that aren't actually true. The truth isn't on the world stage. It doesn't matter if you're on team liar or team truther, you're all lost. You're all in subjectivism. Okay, let us continue going through my headlines for the day. Klaus Schwab hires millions of information warriors to seize control of the internet. I mentioned that yesterday, a couple days ago. This information warrior thing coming from the WEF 666, that's appropriation. They're trying to bury info wars with information warriors. They try to bury everything, which they do all the time. They mud flood. Look, you may not believe in periodic floods that bury civilizations, but I think this reset thing we were talking about earlier, their modus operandi, it's the reset, where they use revolution to burn down what was and build back better. And it looks like improvement, but what they're really doing is if you ask me, they're mud flooding. They're destroying any sort of mass awakening from ever materializing, any possibilities being removed. Like the way they're censoring the internet now, nobody's going to see through this thing. They're putting us into a dark age. They're mud flooding the minds. There is a flood right now. And, that's part of this age of Aquarius, the flood. And I think it's the flood of information. Now, is it wisdom or is it information? It depends on the perceiver. Sink Lloyd says, Whisper Jack shows evidence the Civil War photos and facts were AI generated newsbenders with orphan trained paper. Well, look, news has always been fake. We don't even have to say AI generated, just playwrights. I could name metascriptors. I can name half a dozen metascriptors that are relevant to the news in the world right now without referencing any kind of artificial intelligence, which I consider that to be a divine fallacy. I can't explain it, so I'm going to introduce something supernatural or some advanced technology that doesn't quite exist yet. Like before we introduce something that doesn't exist, you have to consider the possibilities that are there. Otherwise, you exonerate them. The reason why I don't use the term false flag is it exonerates the media. Like they're just reporters, they're not producing it. And when it comes to this AI thing, if we say, oh, AI is writing the fake news, well, then that kind of stops you from digging deeper and finding the truth about who the actual writers are, which I'm saying you can point to them. You can point to the actual script writers. You know, Kubrick's a huge name in all of this, Stanley Kubrick, but Christopher Nolan pretty much supplanted him. Tom Clancy, undeniably important. I think Spike Lee is one of the top meta scripters when it comes to the race war psyops. But there are writers. But now when it comes back to, you know, these accounts of history, well, look, who writes the news? The news. It's representing certain interests. And if you look back at history, what is history? Is it grassroots? Is it human intel? Is it crowdsourced? No, history, just like the mainstream media, represents a certain set of viewpoints, and it omits far more than it actually covers and reports on. History is very narrow. And I'm just saying that we can't consider history to be objective if our news is not objective, unless you think that at some point mankind met in recent years, now they started lying to each other. So I'm with you on that. Now, speaking of civil war, okay, there's always this talk, there's going to be another civil war, or it's World War III. And I don't think there's going to be a civil war because the ones who would have been fighting it are fattened up on popcorn and doped up on hopium. World War III already started on 3/11/2020, but it's not between nations. World War III is the elite versus us, the individuals. But let me bring this up because World War II ended 77 years, 7 months, and 7 days from a couple days ago. On April the 9th, Donald Trump posted World War III. That's all he wrote, World War III. Well, he posted it exactly 77 years, 7 months, and 7 days from the end of World War II. That's a 777. And you could say coincidence. But let's go ahead and look at some of these coincidences. Trump was born 700 days before the founding of Israel. Trump was 70 years old, 7 months and 7 days on his first day in office. Hebrew year 5777. President Trump was elected on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's 7th year, 7th month, and 7th day on office, after 70 years from the nation of Israel being reborn. Again, there's a ton of these 777s connected to Trump. Christ is a Trump family name. His father's name was Frederick Christ Trump. His grandmother, Elizabeth Christ Trump. Christ means anointed one. Frederick Christ Trump Sr. was an American real estate developer and businessman and father of Donald Trump. Now, there is another one here that I found interesting. It's this. Elizabeth Christ Trump, the matriarch of the Trump family, died on June 6th, 1966, which is, 6666. Very interesting. A couple other ones. Trump's New York City childhood home rented for $777 a night on Airbnb. And Donald Trump, at the time of his inauguration, was the 777th richest person with $3.1 billion as his net worth. And with Trump, there's a lot of things beyond just the triple sevens. There's a lot of conspicuous coincidences with the number 58 and 85, which tie into Back to the Future, which takes place in 1958 and 1985. But with Trump, you will also find a ton of this Christ stuff and a ton of Antichrist stuff. And the Antichrist stuff is getting pretty thick. And it's interesting on Twitter because you have these channels calling him out as he's probably the Antichrist, and they're setting him up to be worshipped. And then you have the QAnoners saying, no, he was sent by God. You can't call him the Antichrist. Like, isn't that the story of the Antichrist? I mean, there are people who are dismissing the idea because they don't find Trump charismatic. But, the meta scripting does tell the story, and it goes back decades with Trump. That's why I'm bringing up these numbers. Trump is one of these totally scripted world stage characters, assuming it's only one person and not two or three. I mean, I saw him at that event with Mike Tyson, is at one of these Ultimate Fighting Championship events. He's there with Tyson and Kid Rock. Didn't look like him. Looked like a rubber face, like Joe Rogan wearing a Trump mask or something. Here's an article from the Belfast Telegraph. Man who found wreckage of Titanic speaks ahead of the 111th anniversary of the sinking. Dr. Ballard was speaking to the Telegraph. He says, oh, okay, yeah, that's 111. On this April the 15th, it's the 111th anniversary of its sinking. What does that mean? Now, again, the Titanic movie, I mentioned James Cameron, the Titanic, the connection to Don't Look Up, because the world's going to be hit by a comet because of capitalism. But another thing about it is in the movie Titanic, which came out in 1997, before 9/11, the Titanic itself breaks in two. And these two parts turn vertical. And people fall off them like 9/11 jumpers. Like the whole 9/11 jumper scene of people falling off towers. Yeah, we were shown that in the movie The Titanic a few years before. And then one part sinks, then the other sinks. That's the 9/11 connection. And then where was James Cameron on 9/11? At the site of the wreckage of the actual Titanic. And what are the odds? And he called it Ghosts of the Abyss, which is also very interesting. You know, Revelation 9:11 refers to the abyss, the word the abyss. There's some fascinating connections here, worth getting into, but the anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic is this weekend. And look, JP Morgan, I believe, said that millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. What does that really mean? Astrology comes down to dates and timing and coordinating events. We're talking about these psychological events are always timed perfectly. Well, that's probably astrological. Again, Stormy Daniels summons demons and says civil war is on the way. It's a story to continue to follow. And I think the symbolism, again, has to do with the name Daniels and Revelation and the vision of apocalypse. In fact, you know, Trump called her a horse. He called her horse face. And she had a birthday cake. Stormy Daniels just turned 44. And again, 44 was the date we were all looking at. And on her birthday cake was a black horse. And above it was the word lawless. Well, the Antichrist is referred to as the man of lawlessness. And then you have the apocalypse and the horses go together pretty nicely. Okay, I'm going through my Twitter feed. You can find me at Real Tim Osman. Speaking of UFC, there's a UFC champion named Israel. He's 33 years old. Israel Adesanya. And he regained the UFC championship belt on Easter. Now, here's what's interesting. When he gets his, when he's declared the victor, he kneels in the middle of the mat and he traces a cross right on the floor. But on the floor is a Monster energy drink logo. So again, 33-year-old named Israel regains his championship belt on Easter, and he draws a cross on the Monster logo. Well, what is the Monster logo? It's 3 nails. It's an M, but it's 3 nails. Think about crucifixion. On the back, it says, "Unleash the Beast." And of course, the symbolism with the nails has to do with the nails of Christ, and then the scrape marks look like the Hebrew character, which means nail. But he forms a cross on the 3 nails. He's 33 on Easter. Like this, and again, this is in the middle of this UFC championship bout where all kinds of people are looking. Do you think any of them know the significance of the 666 or the 3 nails, or the cross, or the 33 Israel? I don't know. Probably not. But that doesn't matter, because when it comes to energy, when it comes to like these occult rituals, group magical rituals, they do not require the permission of every attendee to use their loosh or whatever you call it. It's very parasitic. You can be completely ignorant of it, and it could be tapping into you. Now listen to this. This is from 2008. This is a while ago, but this has to do with the Monster Energy drink. And this was posted by Colin760. He said, take a close look at the Monster Energy drink. Huge corporation came out of nowhere. The slogan is Unleash the Beast. When you read Monster on the can, the O is made up of an upside down arch and a cross. The symbol of an arch represents triumph over death. The arch of the sky and heavens. Now, this is interesting. The symbol of the arch, triumph over death, because the word triumph has some etymological connections to Trump, if you ask me, and triumph over death. Now, it goes on to say, the monster symbol, the big M, is not really an M. It's made up of 3 sixes, or the corresponding Hebrew character for the sixes. So 666. Now, he says here, I don't believe in Christ, so I have a hard time with Antichrist stories. Sure, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the stories here. Cubstar says, I like my louche on the rocks with a squeeze of lime. Well, I have been digging into this. I've been studying magic, the occult, as it relates to media. One of the primary things about magical ritual, whatever tradition you're looking at, whatever practice, it's about focused attention. There's something about focused attention. And there's a phenomenon referred to as the evil eye, which is universally known. And this phenomenon is this supposed observed effect of the unconscious gaze of an envious person. The idea is that if somebody's envious or hateful, they may unconsciously radiate something that causes real harm to other people in ways that you would have to probably relegate to psychic, telepathic, or occult. And by occult, I just mean not understood. It's been purposefully obfuscated. But the phenomenon is very well understood, and you can find many charms and symbols throughout the world that are all meant to deflect the supposed effects of the subconscious stare of negative people. My point being, if there's any truth to this, if there's any kind of effect of the observer on the observed, then they're tapping into it. They are hogging it. They're hogging whatever co-creative capacities you have, and they're channeling it into their nightmare universe. Stranger Day says, the stink eye. Very commonly observed phenomenon. Okay, here's an update. The Kentucky bank shooter posted anti-Trump, pro-lockdown content on Reddit. Look, if you're pro-lockdown and you're not locked down, you're a hypocrite, and we don't want to hear it. Like, I would imagine that if I believed in it, and I say this a lot about things, because I find believers to be very passive. If I believed in chemtrails, I'd be suing the airlines. If I believed in lockdowns, I would never leave my house. Like, if I believed climate change was real, I would sell my car. If I believed in the 2020 thing, I probably would have justified a total transition into bunker life. Why would you ever leave? I see people walking around with masks because of this, that, whatever it happens to be of the week. And I'm like, why are you even leaving? Like, if you really believe it so much that you got to cover your face, then maybe it's time for you to have stuff delivered to your bunker so you can stay safe. Unless you're just trying to virtue signal, or you're just super brave. You'd have to be really brave to walk out in the middle of this deadly pandemic. I mean, really pat yourself on the back for your courage if you violated quarantine and you actually believed in it. Anyway, he didn't believe in it, is my point. If he really believed in the premise, he never would have left his house to go shoot up the bank. He would have become a remote worker. But he did post anti-Trump stuff, and he posted pro-lockdown. What does that mean? It means that he's a representative of the fringe left. He's the opposite of a bowl cut shooter. And of course, all the right-wingers are going to believe in it. Oswaldo says these hoax shootings keep getting dumber and more obvious. No, I have to disagree. You're getting smarter and more astute at observing and tearing these things apart. Like, we are getting better as a think tank. We have a methodology. We don't take any BS, and we recognize truth or bait and we call it out. Like, we are getting better. These things aren't getting dumber. We're better critics and we have higher expectations. Crisis actors aren't getting worse. They've always been terrible. Christian nationalist Lance Walnew warns that, quote, God will start killing those who've been standing on the path of what God wants to do through Trump. Quote, it looks to me like there could be some sudden deaths coming in May. I've seen a lot of this. I've seen a lot of this talk of, God's going to punish Trump's enemies coming up in May. MAGA pastor Mark Burns says that God raises up leaders and deliverers like Abraham, Moses, David, Solomon, Esther, Samuel, and Donald Trump. Quote, I believe God has chosen Donald J. Trump for such a time as this to lead our nation out of the evil that we're going through. Again, it's just a reoccurring theme here. Now, speaking of summoning demons, Stormy Daniels summoning demons, Taylor Swift, who's 33, she was at the Grammys. I remember she received a Grammy. She's 33. Beyonce received her 33rd. Just pattern recognition, just conspiracy conjecture. Anyway, Taylor Swift is going viral at her concerts because she does this little dance bit where they put on robes, they get in a pentagram, just eyes wide shut, normal mainstream pop music diva stuff. But people in the audience are chanting, summon the demon. Apparently her audiences get these like viral chants going at these various events. Well, their new viral chant at Taylor Swift concerts is summon the demon, summon the demon. It's from westernjournal.com. Taylor Swift concert goes viral after audience members began chanting. And it looked like they were summoning demons. Linda Curtis says, May the 4th be with us. Wasn't Elon Musk's child 3D printed on May the 4th? I think he had a kid on May the 4th. Oh, yes. XAEA-12, which is, I believe, Elon Musk's Chrome browser recommended password. That's what they named their kid. He was born on May the 4th, 2020. And didn't Chewbacca die on May the 4th? Just doing a little fact checking. I believe the actor Chewbacca, or who played Chewbacca, may have died on that day. There's something with that. But yeah, apparently a lot of people are going to die because, God is going to kill people because they don't want to accept Trump or something. Commenter says, power flows where attention and emotion goes. Currency, liquidity, the Aquarian water comes and it washes away. Elites are all about the electricity. Sparks equal arcs. Interesting. Because there's a show on sci-fi called Ark. And I've been noticing a lot of Ark symbolism, like Noah's Ark, or the various ways of representing the bunker or the underground base. I mean, a bunker is an ark. And this ark theme has been reoccurring. And I've noticed with a lot of these various shootings, a lot of the phraseology is very consistently delivering certain messages. And I have noticed quite a bit with ark. And then the school shooting in Tennessee was at a place called Covenant. More biblical stuff. Ark, Covenant. And there's a movie out now with Jake Gyllenhaal, Donnie Darko. Donnie Darko is actually based on Donald Trump. And this is a key point here. Like, if you can understand how Donald Trump is represented by Donnie Darko, then you can understand how JFK is represented by the Joker, or Joker in Full Metal Jacket. Anyway, the character who plays Donnie Darko, the actor, Jake Gyllenhaal, he's in the movie The Covenant. And The Covenant just came out. It's like 2022. And on the cover, it had the thumbnail, and it has the 33B on this guy's sleeve, which, again, if you Notice the Tennessee shooting. It was 3 adults, 3 kids. The address was 33. It was just replete with that number, as they all are. Okay, continuing. Going through my minds.com account, minds.com/infinite plane society. There's a new show out with Saul, from Better Call Saul. I believe his name is Bob Odenkirk. What's his name? Yeah, Bob Odenkirk. Well, Bob Odenkirk's new TV show out called Lucky Hank has this character named Jeffrey Q. Epstein. Now, I know it's some dark comedy. I haven't taken the time to watch it, but if you haven't seen it, Jeffrey Q. Epstein is a key player. And look, I just point this out because the QAnon event, or it's a PSYOP. The QAnon thing is a psychological operation, and they don't want it to go away. You think the media wants to get rid of it? You think they're exposing it because they want it to go down? No, they keep it alive so that they can have this control. I would even say this: QAnon is controlled opposition. It has to be. It has to be. If you just look at the effect of it from the QAnon shaman down. I got this message from a friend. He said, I woke up to my neighbor that's petrified of chemtrails. And the friend had sent a video of the sky and said, did you see this? I'm heading out, but I'm not sure it's a good idea. Now, if you ever hesitated leaving your house because of chemtrails, you might have chemtrail angst or chemtrail anxiety. Now, it's a thing because climate anxiety is a thing. They call it eco-anxiety. And this is, quote, the distress related to worries about the effects of climate change. It's not a mental illness. Rather, it's anxiety rooted in uncertainty about the future and alerting us to the dangers of a changing climate. Again, eco-anxiety is a thing. And I've also noticed that chemtrail anxiety is a thing. And it's not a mental illness. It's a response to perceived fears about what's going to occur. Here's a quote from William Cooper: read about everything, listen to everyone, but don't believe anything unless you can prove it with your own research. Yeah, I have Fox News and CNN in my right eye. In my left eye, I'm in my Discord server. And all day long, I'm looking at all the information. I'm listening to controlled opposition. I'm listening to dupes and stooges, brainwashies and doctrinaires, and actual PSYOP operatives and liars. But I don't believe blindly in anything. I have a high standard of evidence, and I don't drop it. Here's a little throwback. In 2016, there was a 4chan post ID 77777, quote, Trump will win. Just another example. I first learned about this Trump and the sevens a while ago. Salty Siren says, I've seen so many people regressing lately from their beliefs all the way down to pronouncing simple words like library. I heard at least 5 people say it library last week alone. So weird. Yeah, it's the TikTokification of the human mind. That's, I talk about how the IPS is a fake news wood chipper. Well, the mass mind is being put through a wood chipper. Everything's being cut into sound bites, into pieces, into shorts, into a flow of just nonstop information that doesn't have any relevance. It's not all connected. And if you notice patterns, you're a conspiracy theorist. Now, in our research, we talked about the symbolism of these various characters like MLK. MLK, the dead Sun King, symbolism attached to that, attached to the King of Wakanda, Chadwick Boseman. We've been talking about the symbolism employed by the elite with a lot of their manufactured martyrs. And MLK's death day was on 4/4. It was the 55th anniversary of MLK's assassination. And of course, this tied into Trump's arraignment and the 55th Q drop about the storm, etc. Anyway, here's a little piece of information just to verify, because we've been talking about the symbolism of the obelisk. where on the 57th anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech, you had BLM, who are the new Black Panthers, gathered around the obelisk for MLK on the day that the Black Panther Chadwick Boseman from Wakanda died. So the Black Dead King from the movie was correlating to the Black Dead King, MLK Jr. And the obelisk represents the dead earth god, Osiris, Saturn. This is a set of symbols, or rather gods, or whatever you want to call them, but it's all syncretized, where they're all represented by the same basic stories. And in this case, it turns out that Moloch, MLK, is a Hebrew word which corresponds to the star of, or rather the Saturn, the planet Saturn. So Moloch and Saturn are positively connected, but MLK phonetically spells Moloch, not a coincidence. But what it means is, it means sacrifice, which is kind of interesting. Because Saturn is the god of, we're talking about time, death, cycles, the cycles of life and death, ending with sacrifice or the harvest. And when you look into Jesus, it's all about sacrifice. But it's also an agrarian story. It's about the sun. Like, here's an example. Saturn is the death card in the tarot corresponds to Saturn. It's number 13. And why is 13 associated with death, but also with rebirth? Well, it's because these sacrifices, these harvests aren't the end. It's just the end of that particular cycle. This is another reason why the earth god today is represented by the cult of recycling. Look at the recycling symbol. It's a 6-pointed star in the negative space. It's comprised of 3 arrows. The 3 arrows making the triangle. It's, again, about death and rebirth. But the number 13, this is where it gets interesting. Every year has 12 months, and then it begins a new cycle. So your 13th month is the first month. So 13 is actually the end and the beginning. And you'll find also symbolic connections between Saturn and the scythe, or Father Time, and the hourglass, and this theme of the sickle, and the cycle. These things are all very much connected, and it's all central to this cult. All of their symbolism is essentially pointing at Saturn. And by Saturn, we're not talking about the light in the sky. We're talking about their earth god, their god of death and resurrection. Like, for all this talk about Gaia, I'm sorry, Gaia is a misgendering, because the earth is not if you look at their own symbolic system, the earth god is definitively male. And the goddess is the sky. The earth, male. Sky, goddess. And this is their own symbolic system. This is Thelema. This is their Masonic cult. This is Mystery Babylon. But recently, they've kind of made a change on that. Speaking of Gaia, by the way, the World Economic Forum has this program in play. It's called the Global AI Alliance. They are preparing for the AI god to hijack all of our governments. And they're actually calling it Gaia. I mean, how perfectly timed is that with Avatar 2? New York Post has this article. FBI documents associate internet slang like based, red pill with extremism. Based and red pill. It's only extreme if you're on the right. Notice that. And it's also the FBI. You'll notice that the political right sees the FBI as their antagonist. It's not a new thing. Not a coincidence that David Hogg is the son of an FBI agent. But anyway, I associate words like cringe and treasonous with the FBI. So I guess it's fair. Okay, let us continue. Thursday, Donald Trump's going to be in court again. And I was noting how his avatar on Truth Social looks like the new Joker poster. His eye is covered in blue paint. The rest of his face is in the red and the white stripes. It's the American flag. The Joker poster has Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker with blue over one eye and then red and white. And it's only half of his face. Same symbolism we always see. But the significance here, of course, is Trump is going to New York again, and the place where he was arraigned is where the Joker movie is being filmed. Now, the Joker movie being filmed there at this time has everything to do with Trump. Because if you remember what I was saying a little while ago about Full Metal Jacket and about the character Joker representing JFK, well, this correlation between Trump and the Joker is a way of correlating him with with JFK. Here's some concurrent programming for you. Are any of you watching the show The Last of Us? It's a new drama, marks HBO's second largest series debut over a decade. In over a decade, that's a big deal. Look, the movies that get popular because they need this stuff in your head. They're downloading it into the public mind. It has nothing to do with the merits of the actual movie or show. Well, this new show called The Last of Us is their second largest debut, and it's about a killer fungus in a post-apocalyptic world. Now, the thing is, I was watching CNN this morning, and I'm seeing all kinds of articles about fungus just suddenly coming out of nowhere. Well, listen to these headlines. Could the zombie fungus in TV's The Last of Us really infect people? The zombie fungus from The Last of Us is real. Now, here are the articles. Cases of deadly fungus found in Louisiana. Why it matters. In a first, plant fungus infects a man from Kolkata, that's from Hindu. And Hawaii News, rapid death fungus detected in Wayne mountain range for the first time. The Salt Lake Tribune, quote, "The Last of Us is right. Our warming planet is a petri dish." So the story is, as the planet warms up, these fungi come to life. Another way that capitalism is killing us. BC anticipating fungal disease spread behind deaths of North American bats. Bats are making a return. 5 things to know for April 11th. Louisville shooting COVID fungus. Ukraine and Dalai Lama. Yeah, okay, that's one of the top stories then is this fungus. Indian mushroom farmer becomes first ever victim of rare fungal disease. Again, this ties into The Last of Us. I would call this predictive, or rather I'd call it concurrent programming. We're joined here by Mom with Sons. Thank you for joining. And if you're late or if you showed up midway through, the replay will be sent out to Patreon. I'll be blasting it. It'll have much better audio. Okay, we've been talking about The Last of Us, Dolly Biden, Stormy Daniels summoning demons, Taylor Swift summoning demons. The right wing is suddenly afraid of mass shooters because now the mass shooters are all libs. COVID is over. Trump's going before the AG on Thursday, and Saturday is the 111th anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic. Fascinating. All this stuff is synchronizing together quite well. A few other minor points. The World Economic Forum, 666, said that they're going to purge the internet of conspiracies and hate. And when I say 666, it's because of the O in world, the O in economic, and the O in forum. There's like a corona, like a sun and moon eclipse drawn over World Economic Forum, and the line goes through the O's. That makes 3 6s. Also, the O is the 15th letter. And if you add it, 5 plus 1 is 6. So you get your 666. They're really good at keeping the 666s encoded into everything. Okay, continuing. We are live. It is 4/11/2023. It's also the anniversary of Anton LaVey from the Church of Satan. Very interesting character if you look at the connections between he and the Charles Manson event. or the Night Stalker. The Charles Manson killings done by Sharon Tate, that was one of his dancers. You can find pictures of her dressed like a witch, coming out of a coffin, topless. He had these strippers that were witches or something, and those were the ones that were employed in the Manson killings. The name Anton LaVey, obviously not the real name. And I believe if you look at their star, their pentagram, they spell Leviathan around the 5 points of the star in Hebrew characters. And as an anagram, you could extract from Leviathan, Anton LaVey. A slight change in the pronunciation, but it's more or less anagrammatically there. And the key point here is that this particular group worships Leviathan. They worship the devil as the serpent of the ocean, or the abyss. The abyss is what they call it, as in Ghosts of the Abyss, James Cameron with the Titanic sank. And I think all of this stuff ties into the Kraken. Think Leviathan, Kraken. And this Kraken symbol forefront since the election was being disputed really started in the summer of 2020. And they really started hyping up this Kraken. But it's a reoccurring theme. And the Kraken is something that rises. And this recent show called The Rig on Amazon, which was about Mother Gaia coming to life and killing off the West. It's Gaia, but the guy is reading a book called Kraken Awakes. So Kraken and Gaia are synonymous. And when you look into the storyline here that's being conveyed to us, we've been given this reoccurring theme of some like subterranean thing that's rising, like Godzilla. Interestingly, anybody here know Godzilla's birthday? November the 3rd. November the 3rd was the release the Kraken date. November the 3rd is the date the One World Tower opened. And it represents rising. Again, the tower rising. It's the Tower of Babel. Rising from the ashes. Symbolism here. But I'm getting somewhere with this. At the most remote place from human habitation on Earth, as they represent it to us, it's a place called the Pole of Inaccessibility, Point Nemo. Point Nemo is central to Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And this is the place where NASA dumps its satellites. And they call it the spacecraft cemetery. Well, what is a cemetery? It's a place where all the dead are. Well, this is the location. Point Nemo is a location where H.P. Lovecraft, sci-fi horror author 100 plus years ago, where he wrote about, at this location, which we would call Point Nemo, this is where the elder gods fell. They fell from the sky, and now they have a dead city where the NASA satellites are junked, their spacecraft cemetery. But anyway, the primary alien in the Lovecraftian mythos is a big kraken-like creature, big octopus, titanic being. And the primary storyline is that we're reaching the point when the, quote, stars are right, which makes me think Great Reset, when it's going to rise. That the Kraken, Cthulhu. And all of this connects with where we are right now in time, being that Pluto just returned to its 1776 position relative to America's birthing. And Pluto is Hades, and Hades releases the Kraken. This is a recurring theme, but it's been building. And I'm just bringing up the Anton LaVey character because that church is one of these, just one, of the facets of this cult. They used all the same symbolism, the same basic messaging, but in their case, they definitely pray to the west, to the ocean, and it's all about this Leviathan creature, or whatever this Leviathan represents. And I don't think the Leviathan necessarily has to represent a big giant squid. Oh, and by the way, I was talking about Godzilla too. Godzilla 11/3, his birthday. Well, if you look at the most recent Godzilla versus King Kong movie, Godzilla is stored at sub-level 33, below the ground. So here's that theme again, subterranean. It's from below. But why 33? I think it has to do with this. Maybe this Leviathan, maybe this Kraken isn't about a giant squid, but it's about us. It's about collectivism, wiping out individuals. It's about perhaps even mass demonic possession. Because think about it, Godzilla, 33 levels below. This must tie in, if you ask me, to the 33 vertebrae and the rising of the Kundalini, the fire snake. It's the same, it's the serpentine. But this is, again, a reoccurring symbol that we see of the rising. And this raising or rising of a Leviathan seems to be, or the Kraken seems to be one of the predominant themes today. But what does it mean? What does it mean when Leviathan wakes up, when the Kraken's released? And I think we're about to see. Commenter says IPS calendars. You know, we should do a calendar and have all the hoax anniversaries. It would be full though, every day. If we actually included every PSYOP. But I do keep up with hoax anniversaries. Dates are everything because, again, the cult that runs the world is obsessed with astrology and astronomy, magic, and controlling reality. Wonket.com, Christians are having a satanic panic over Taylor Swift. Yeah, of course. Again, pattern recognition. You see somebody in black robes doing the eyes wide shut routine, and people are chanting, summon the demon. And if you say, oh, I think she's summoning the demon, now you're a conspiracy theorist. You see the Dalai Lama assaulting a child in a disgusting Biden-esque way, and you say, oh, that's bad. That's typical of what we would expect of these elite. And they say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. No, I'm an observer of reality, and I'm actually neutral. I'm not in the Psy war. I am very neutral in this thing. I'm as neutral as can be. I'm an off-world stage observer. What we do as auto hoaxers is more akin to, I would say, alien anthropology, like from the outside looking in. Because everyone is in the box. The people who buy the world stage as is are in the TV. They're in the box. They're in the black cube of Saturn. The cult that runs the world, the monolithic, monotheistic, reality monopolizing cult that runs the world, that seeks to be the sole author of everything. P. Trippa says, your analysis makes sense that we all have at the source. Why use the same words over and over, such as Kraken? Right. Look at one, again, this is the 1/6 event has been consistently connected with the Kraken. And this is how far back it goes. January 6th, release the Kraken. I mentioned the rig on Amazon about the Kraken waking up. Well, it literally has a crack in the ocean that opens up and precipitates the destruction of civilization. They're using it because it's word magic. They're using it because it's reinforcing this story, but it's also this meta script. It has to be told in a way that it's immersive and it's everywhere. Like if you think back, when Alex Jones was on Piers Morgan and he said 1776 will commence again if you try to take the guns, this is key. Taking the guns is the, quote, turning point that triggers the right. And this is one of the key points. It has to do with Waco, has to do with the Turner Diaries and Timothy McVeigh. Also, like Koresh, McVeigh was 33. But 1776 will commence again is what Jones said. And he said this after mentioning that the Department of Homeland Security had purchased 1.6 billion hollow point rounds. Like 1.6 billion, January 6th, 1/6. Fox News being sued for their defamation of Dominion voting systems for 1.6 billion. The 1/6 is a very consistent thing with all of these, all pointing to January 6th. All of this suggests that January 6th was not random. It was planned years in advance. It's scripted. You know, funnily enough, there's a show on Netflix called Inside Job. Inside Job is an obvious 9/11 reference. Season 1, episode 6 has a Kraken, and it takes down Jeff Bezos's yacht. Jeff Bezos represents Nimrod, the builder of the Tower of Babel. Jeff Bezos's mega yacht represents the Titanic, the ship of state being run by the billionaires, the richest men on earth. The Kraken taking down the Titanic is the Kraken taking down the Tower of Babel. That's what I mean. I think this Kraken thing is about unleashing something that tears down the Tower of Babel. Now, the Tower of Babel, it represents the world order as presently constituted. And their whole system of resets is about staying ahead of the masses. And I think what the elite do is they hit the reset button, they break everything, build back better. And we just don't know any better. We don't know how far back into this, like we could be put into a dark age and not know it. Especially now, people are so visually illiterate. Even CNN is remarking on how you need an understanding of AI generated graphics and how to tell a deep fake from the real thing, or you're going to become a dupe. And they say this with a tinge of alarmism. However, we were born deep faked. It's just misdirection to worry about. We're not going to be deep faked. We were born into a deep faked reality. And the internet being censored and quarantined, well, media has always been a quarantine. We were born into a quarantine mentally. All right, Trump will head back to New York on Thursday. We'll be following that. Hopefully they arrest DALAI Biden. The world heating up from global warming is going to precipitate some outbreak of a deadly fungus as per Last of Us. And again, if it happens on TV, it's going to happen in reality. Stormy Daniels, Taylor Swift summoning demons. The right wing is now suddenly afraid of school shooters and mass shooters, and they never were before. And COVID is over. COVID is officially over, which means now we can make room for the fungus takeover. Anyway, thank you all for joining. I will be sending out a newsletter today with all of the archives. Linda Curtis says, the harnesses always reminded me of Pinocchio. Are you talking about the ISS? The International Space Station, where these guys are hanging like puppets? And speaking of, there was a new Pinocchio movie. I didn't get a chance to watch it, but I know it was starring Tom Hanks as Geppetto. I'm like, Geppetto? Yeah, Tom Hanks is at the center of the QAnon thing, as far as being one of the primary Pizzagate. And here he is playing the role of Geppetto. Like, what an ill-advised role to take at a time like this, where he makes boys out of wood or something. Very bizarre stuff. I think it's all just symbolic for mind control or something along those lines. Very sinister. Is there anyone more sinister than Tom Hanks? Benton says, I was going to ask if you're going to cover the Chris Tyson from Mr. Beast going on hormones. Mr. Beast. Is that the guy with the burger business? Is it Mr. Beast Burgers? Is it the same person? Is it the burgers that are doing that to him? Or is there something else that he's putting into his system? Because I haven't had those yet. So I haven't experienced the Mr. Beast burger and what it does. I haven't covered it. I have seen it, though. I'm not quite sure what to make about all of it yet, though. Because it does seem to me that there's a deliberate effort to incite the appearance of a satanic panic on the right. But at the same time, it seems like the world is under the thrall of a satanic cult. So, conspiracy theorist or pattern recognizer, you tell me. Thanks for joining. We will be back.